And just quickly to give you a sense of how you can play a part in this. This is another way to look at the same cost curve, but standing in the shoes of just one industry sector. And you could pick any, you could pick your own. But we've picked the chemicals industry, just as an example. And we went through and looked at, if you're a chemicals company, let's look across that cost curve. If you recall, there was vehicles, buildings, land, cleaner power. And standing in the shoes of a chemicals company and look at where can you play a part in this? Because, as Arthur was saying earlier, this is where your future demand is going to come from. No matter what the policy mix, these are ranked in order of cost. So it's likely that the market is going to choose the sensible order and try and do the least cost things first. So it's likely that what's in our research is likely to be uncovered by the market, even though markets always surprise. So what can a chemical company do? And you'd be surprised, all these boxes that we've shaded in is areas where they could play a part. Everything from innovative coolant, metals replacement, insulation material, forestry fertilisers, wind blade materials, organic film for photovoltaics, and of course carbon capture sequestration techniques. That's just one example from the breadth of the chemicals industry. You could each use that example from any industry that you're in. We've tried to do it for a couple just to highlight. Here's another, the energy efficiency side. So upgrading our buildings for energy efficiency, it's not rocket science. It uses technology that's already available, and also importantly, it uses labour that's locally available. You can't do an energy building upgrade online, and you can't outsource it to China or India. It has to be local people who are installing it. Hopefully, it's local people who are making the stuff, or at least supplying it, or at least transporting it. So we added up, what would that be worth? So you see these shaded boxes here. Everything that's below the zero line, that's the energy efficiency activities. We valued, firstly, the value of the energy that you save if you, in fact, undertake these activities. And we discovered, when you added it all up, and remembering there are some barriers there, lots and lots of small transactions, the value of the energy was worth $5 billion per annum by 2020 across the country. And I remember we did this research just after Kevin Rudd had negotiated the health package, this big health reform with the states, and they'd had to find another $5 billion to secure the health reform package. We're sitting on $5 billion worth of energy that we don't need to use, because technology has in fact improved enough that if we could get around to actually upgrading our older technology with the more efficient stuff, and if all of us did it in these sectors, there's $5 billion worth of energy savings right there. Importantly, when you add that up across the country, we found that for each business as well, it's individually sensible to do. That just the 200 businesses that are in the government's big users energy program, the EEO, they could save 2.5% of Australia's total energy use just by themselves doing this energy reduction, and save themselves $1 billion net savings per annum. That's after they were required by the government to investigate energy efficiency opportunities that initially they argued didn't exist, and that this was a regulatory burden on the economy. They've done the studies, they've publicly reported it, and it adds up to a 7% reduction against their business as usual, $1 billion savings, and it reclaims 2.5% of Australia's energy use that we could use in other ways, or not use, and avoid the emissions. Then what happens when we look locally? So ClimateWorks has taken this research to the local level, taken our national report and tried to do the same thing for just one community. We worked firstly with the city of Greater Geelong. We did the same study across their community. There's not a lot of rural or agricultural land there, so it was mostly urban. And what we found was they can reverse the growth in their emissions. They could achieve a 6% reduction, which was actually the equivalent of eliminating all the household emissions in Geelong. That's 110,000 households. And the value of the energy savings for them was $60 million. So that's the Geelong share of that $5 billion I talked about, $60 million across that economy. To implement all of that activity would be a $1 billion inward investment, capital equipment including for cogeneration. There's a waste-to-energy pilot plant being trialled with Alcoa, not with Alcoa, with the local council. Alcoa's trialling the geothermal plant, which if it succeeds could become a 140 megawatt plant. And so we've added up at what all that capital would be if that capital came into the region. And now with the government's package, there are sources of funding that could deliver that sort of capital. So you can see this as an opportunity to bring investment into your region and then to have the local jobs who can do the installations, provided you can help do the coordination and maybe help aggregate so that those smaller transaction costs can be eliminated. You'll see there just representatively, we measured what Geelong's emissions would do under business as usual if they didn't change their economy. And then we looked at what can you do just from using existing technologies. So we didn't say Alcoa had to produce any less. We didn't say Ford should relocate. We didn't say Boral should turn down its cement plants. We looked at the economy as it is. And we said, what could existing technologies do? And existing, we were a bit generous with the definition there, so waste to energy and geothermal, they're being piloted. But over the next 8 years, there are already business cases, they've been costed, so we were generous with the definition of existing because the trial is going to happen. And what we found was they reverse the growth in their emissions. And they start getting themselves onto a path that is more than the bipartisan target of 5% below emissions, just in the city of Greater Geelong. I'd be encouraged to see what the same study would find for the Illawarra region. And then the jobs that come from doing this sort of activity. So we've talked about the energy that you can save. What about investing in the equipment and to install it? So in the city of Melbourne, postcode 3000, there's already a program to try and overcome this financial spreading out problem, that the owner of the building might not be the same as the occupant, that you might want to move out of the building. So there's a piece of legislation that's now also been passed in New South Wales that will allow building owners to borrow the money externally and then have the occupant of the building repay the loan through the equivalent amount of the energy savings over the life of that building via the council rates, so no extra paperwork. That's being trialled in the City of Melbourne, and there's a study that was undertaken that if they just did that for the City of Melbourne, it could drive around $1.3 billion of additional retrofitting expenditure into the economy. And that's between 5,000 and 11,000 full-time equivalent jobs over the decade in installing all that sort of construction and equipment installations. Equivalent of 800 full-time positions, just postcode 3000. And lastly, just to show that in a macro sense, these numbers do in fact mean something. When we add up all the small bits of energy savings here, it is more than the total capital we need to fund the higher cost activities. So from an Australia economy-wide sense, you can see there that the cost-efficient stuff can help us bear the cost of the higher, more expensive, cleaner power solutions. I know there'll be a lot more said about how we share the economy-wide gains and investments, but you might not have thought that on a scale, just on the scale of it, that energy efficiency can in fact unleash enough savings that we can then cover the costs of the more expensive equipment. That's all I could have time to run through today. There's a lot more information on our website and I'll be happy to take questions afterward. Thank you.
We are running a little bit behind time, but we're still going to have some questions and answers. I'm going to ask Stephen Jones, who's going to replace Mark Dreyfus, if he might come up on the stand, please, and Jed Carney and Arthur, if you might come up on the stage as well. And if you've got any questions you'd like to ask our panel, please stand up, identify yourself when you're asked to give a question, and if you're representing an organisation, that might be helpful as well. So, any questions of our panel? We've got microphones around the room, I think. There's a microphone over there, and microphone there, and any questions?